My name is Margaret Hayes, and I'm 72 years old now. But this story begins 30 years ago, when I was a different person entirely, or perhaps, when I finally became who I was always meant to be. I stood outside courtroom 4B that humid Tuesday morning, my hands trembling as I clutched my worn leather purse. The marble floors of the courthouse gleamed under fluorescent lights, and every click of footsteps echoed like a countdown. I had traveled across 3 states to be here, not for justice in the traditional sense, but for something I had waited 3 decades to deliver. Truth. My daughter, Patricia, was inside. She didn't know I was coming. How could she? We hadn't spoken in 15 years. The last time I saw her, she was 27, standing in my driveway with tears streaming down her face, screaming words that still cut through my dreams. "You're not my mother anymore. You're a stranger." But today, I would walk through those courtroom doors. And today, everything would change. Let me take you back to where it all began. I was born Michael Hayes in a small town in Ohio. I married younger to a woman named Carolyn who seemed like sunshine itself. We had Patricia when I was 25. She was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and eyes that looked at me like I hung the moon. I worked at the steel mill, came home dirty every night. Carolyn would have dinner waiting, and Patricia would run to the door, squealing "Daddy." I'd scoop her up, and for those few moments, the weight I carried inside would lift. But it never stayed lifted, because I was living a lie. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but a lie nonetheless. I had known since I was 6 years old that something was different. The boy in the mirror didn't match the person inside. But this was 1955. You didn't talk about such things. You buried them deep. You married. You had children. You pretended. And I pretended beautifully for 37 years. Carolyn found the box in 2007. I had hidden it in the attic, behind old Christmas decorations and forgotten photo albums. Inside were clothes, dresses, scarves, a few items of jewelry I'd collected over the years from thrift stores, places where no one would remember my face. She didn't yell at first. She just sat on our bed, holding a blue dress, crying silently. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. "How long?" "Always," I whispered. "I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry." What followed were months of agony. Carolyn tried. God knows she tried. But how do you reconcile 32 years of marriage with a truth this profound? Patricia was 32 herself by then, married to a man named David, with 2 children of her own. When we told her, she looked at me like I was a monster. "You lied to us," she said, her voice shaking. "Every single day, every birthday, every Christmas, every time you told me you loved me, it was all a lie." "No," I pleaded. "Patricia, sweetheart, I've always been your parent." That part was never a lie. But she couldn't hear me. The pain was too loud. Carolyn filed for divorce. Patricia stopped taking my calls. My grandchildren Emma and Joshua, children I'd pushed on swings and read bedtime stories to, were suddenly forbidden from seeing me. I was erased. I moved to Portland, Oregon. Started over. At 62 years old, I finally began living as the woman I'd always been inside. Margaret, the name my grandmother had. The woman who used to tell me I had kind eyes. It wasn't easy. My voice was deep. My hands were large. People stared. Some were cruel, but others so beautiful, unexpected. Others showed me kindness I'd never known. There was Rosa, who managed the small apartment building where I lived. She knew my story within a week. She never treated me differently. Just knocked on my door every Sunday with tamales and stories about her own life. There was Dr. Ellen Park, who helped me through my transition with such gentle professionalism that I cried in her office more than once, not from pain but from gratitude. And there was Gerald, sweet, quiet Gerald, who I met at a community garden 3 years after I moved. He was 70, a widower, and when I nervously told him my story over coffee, he simply nodded and said, "We've all got a past, Margaret. What matters is who we are when we're brave enough to be ourselves." We became companions. Not quite romance, but something deeper than friendship. He taught me about roses. I taught him about forgiveness, though I was still learning that lesson myself. In 2012, I received a letter. The return address made my hands shake. Patricia. I almost didn't open it. 5 years of silence had built walls I wasn't sure I could climb. But curiosity, or perhaps hope, won. The letter was short. Margaret, I don't know if you still go by that name. I don't know much about you at all anymore, but I need to tell you that David and I are divorcing. He's been having an affair for 2 years with my best friend. Everyone keeps telling me to forgive him, to understand, to remember the good times. And all I can think about is what I said to you, about lying, about betrayal. I don't know if you can forgive me. I don't even know if you should, but I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for not trying to understand. Your daughter, Patricia. I wrote back that same evening. We began exchanging letters, slowly, carefully, like two people learning to walk after a terrible accident. She told me about the divorce, about how David had gaslighted her for years, making her feel crazy for suspecting the truth, about how her friend Jennifer, who had been her maid of honor, who had held her hand through my transition revelation, had been sleeping with her husband in the home they'd built together. I told her about Margaret, about Gerald, about the small life I'd built that felt more real than anything I'd lived before. We didn't see each other, not yet. The letters were enough. A bridge being built one careful plank at a time. Then came 2015. Patricia called me. Actually called. Her voice was urgent. It's David, she said. He's suing for full custody of Emma and Joshua. Has a broken bar. He's using you. My blood went cold. What do you mean? He's claiming I'm an unfit mother because I've exposed the children to a broken bar, to inappropriate influences. He's calling you. Her voice broke. He's using your transition to paint me as someone who makes dangerous choices. His lawyer is building a case that I've compromised the children's well-being by allowing them to know about you. I hadn't seen my grandchildren in 13 years. Patricia and I had only recently reconnected, but David was weaponizing my existence to take Patricia's children away. When is the hearing? I asked. Next month. But Margaret, you don't have Toa. What courtroom? Which brings me back to that Tuesday morning, outside courtroom 4B. I had taken a bus for 3 days to get here. Gerald had wanted to come, but I told him this was something I needed to do alone. Rosa had packed me sandwiches and pressed a rosary into my hands, even though she knew I wasn't religious. For courage, she'd said. Through the courtroom doors, I could hear voices. David's lawyer was speaking, his tone dripping with disdain. A broken bar, and furthermore, Your Honor, Miss Hayes has demonstrated a pattern of poor judgment that directly impacts these children's moral development. Her own father or mother, I heard Patricia say quietly. Excuse me? Margaret is my mother, not my father. If you're going to attack her, at least use the right words. My heart swelled. I pushed open the door. The courtroom wasn't large, maybe 30 people scattered across wooden benches. David sat at one table with his lawyer, looking smug in an expensive suit. Patricia sat at another, thinner than I remembered, with a female lawyer beside her who looked fierce despite her young age. And at the bench sat Judge Raymond Porter. I recognized him immediately. He had aged, we all had, but those eyes were unmistakable. We had worked together at the steel mill 40 years ago. He'd been in management even then, working his way through night law school. We'd been friendly, not close, but friendly enough that we'd shared lunch breaks and stories about our young families. He had known me as Michael. The courtroom fell silent as I walked down the aisle. Patricia turned, and her face crumpled. She half stood, tears already falling, but I shook my head gently. Not yet. Judge Porter's face had gone white. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. Your Honor, I said clearly, my voice steady despite my racing heart. My name is Margaret Hayes. I believe I'm being discussed here today, and I'd like to speak. David's lawyer recovered first. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. This individual isn't on the witness list. This individual, Judge Porter said slowly, still staring at me, appears to be the subject of much of your argument, Counselor. I think we can allow her to speak. He paused. Miss Hayes, please approach. I walked to the witness stand. The bailiff swore me in. My hand on the Bible felt surreal and odd because of any religious conflict. but because of the weight of the moment. Judge Porter leaned forward. Miss Hayes, do we have broken bar? Do we know each other? We do, Your Honor. Though it's been many years, we worked together at Harrison Steel Mill in Ohio. You knew me by a different name then. I watched the recognition fully dawn. His eyes widened. Michael, he whispered. Yes, sir. Though I go by Margaret now. The courtroom erupted in whispers. David's face cycled through confusion, then understanding, then disgust. Patricia was crying openly now. Judge Porter cleared his throat. Order. I'll have order. He looked at me with something I didn't expect. Warmth. Miss Hayes, I'd like to hear your testimony. I told them everything, not the medical details. Those weren't anyone's buzziness about the truth of it. The decades of pain, the price of honesty, the courage it took to become myself. And then I looked at David. I understand you're using my existence to claim my daughter is unfit, that knowing me, accepting me, somehow damages children. I paused. I raised Patricia for 27 years. I coached her softball team. I taught her to drive. I stayed up with her when she had nightmares and celebrated with her when she made the honor roll. I loved her then, and I love her now. The only thing that changed was that I finally stopped lying about who I am. I turned to Judge Porter. The real question isn't whether Patricia is unfit for showing her children that love and acceptance matter. The real question is what kind of man uses someone's journey toward authenticity as a weapon? What kind of father teaches his children that it's acceptable to betray someone who loves you, and then uses cruelty to try to escape the consequences? David's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is inflammatory. Sit down, counselor, Judge Porter said quietly. His eyes never left mine. Miss Hayes, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. In all the years you knew me at the mill, did I ever treat you with anything but respect? No, Your Honor. You were always kind. And do you think, he said slowly, that if you had told me then what you've told us today, that kindness would have changed? I thought about it, truly thought about it. I don't know, I said honestly. It was a different time. People were different. Or maybe they were the same, just louder about their fear. He nodded. That's a fair answer. But I can tell you now that kindness wouldn't have changed, because character isn't about what someone looks like or how they identify. It's about how they treat others. And from what I see here, you've shown more character in the last 20 minutes than Mr. Brennan has shown in this entire proceeding. David shot to his feet. This is prejudicial. She's not even what? Mr. Brennan? Judge Porter's voice could have cut glass. Please, finish that sentence. David's mouth opened and closed. His lawyer pulled him back down. Judge Porter looked at Patricia. Miss Hayes, I'm going to ask you something. When did you reconcile with your mother? 3 years ago, Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion. We've been writing letters. She's been helping me through my divorce. She's been kind and patient. Even though her voice broke. Even though I abandoned her when she needed me most. And have your children met her? No, Your Honor. I wanted to wait until this was resolved. I didn't want David to have more ammunition. Judge Porter sat back. Mr. Brennan, I've heard your case. I've listened to your lawyer paint Miss Patricia Hayes as irresponsible and morally compromised. But what I see before me is a woman who learned to extend grace to someone she didn't initially understand. A woman who shows growth over rigidity. And a woman whose ex-husband betrayed her trust in the most fundamental way, then has the audacity to question her judgment. He turned to me. Miss Margaret Hayes, thank you for your courage in coming here today. You've given me a gift of perspective. It's easy to sit in judgment. It's harder to remember that we're all just trying to find our way to authenticity. Judge Porter awarded primary custody to Patricia. David would have supervised visitation every other weekend. The decision wasn't just about me, of course. Patricia's lawyer had documented David's affair, his financial dishonesty, his patterns of manipulation. But I'd like to think my testimony mattered. Afterward, in the courthouse hallway, Patricia fell into my arms. Mom, she sobbed. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I held her the way I'd held her when she was small, when nightmares or skinned knees needed soothing. SHH, I whispered. It's okay. We're okay now. I wasted so much time. No, I said firmly, pulling back to look at her. You took the time you needed. We both did. We're here now. That's what matters. Emma and Joshua appeared from around a corner, escorted by Patricia's lawyer. They were 15 and 13 now, nearly grown. They stared at me with curiosity and uncertainty. "Kids," Patricia said, wiping her eyes. "This is Margaret, your grandmother, my mom." Emma stepped forward first. She had Patricia's eyes and, I realized with a pang, my grandmother's smile. "Hi," she said shyly. "Mom's told us about you." "In her letters, I mean. She reads them to us sometimes." Tears blurred my vision. "Hello, sweetheart, you're so beautiful." Joshua hung back, 13-year-old awkwardness evident. But then he said, "Dad said some really mean stuff about you." "I know, but Mom said you were brave, that you chose honesty even when it cost you everything." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I think that's pretty cool," he said quietly. And just like that, the last piece of my heart that had been locked away for 13 years clicked open. That was 10 years ago now. I'm 72, living in a small house in Portland that Gerald helped me buy before he passed 3 years ago. He was a good man. He taught me that family isn't just blood, it's the people who choose to show up, day after day. Patricia and I are close now. She visits twice a year, and we talk on the phone every Sunday. Emma is 25 and working as a teacher. She writes me long emails about her students and sometimes asks for advice about patience and understanding. Joshua is 23 and studying social work. He told me once that watching my story taught him that people deserve second chances, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for one. I never saw David again after that courtroom, but I heard through Patricia that he remarried. I hope he's better to his new wife than he was to my daughter. I hope he's learned that betrayal leaves scars that never fully heal. Judge Raymond Porter retired last year. He sent me a card that simply said, "Thank you for reminding me why I became a judge, yet to see the humanity in everyone who stands before me." I keep it on my refrigerator, next to photos of Emma and Joshua, and a picture of Gerald and me in his garden, both of us laughing. Rosa still brings me tamales every Sunday. She's 80 now and moves slower, but her kindness hasn't dimmed. Neither has her insistence that I need to eat more. People ask me sometimes if I regret waiting so long to transition, if I wish I'd been brave enough to live as Margaret sooner. The truth is complicated. Would I have loved more years of authenticity? Yes, but I also treasure the years I had with Patricia as her father. Would she have been born if I transitioned earlier? Would I have had those precious moments of her childhood? I can't know, and I've learned that regret is a heavy stone to carry. It's better to set it down and walk forward with gratitude for what remains. I learned that betrayal comes in many forms. David betrayed Patricia with infidelity. I betrayed myself with silence. Patricia betrayed our bond with rejection. But the beautiful thing about betrayal is that it doesn't have to be the end. It can be a beginning if we're brave enough to face the truth and choose differently. I learned that revenge isn't about hurting those who hurt you. The sweetest revenge is living well, living authentically. Standing up in that courtroom wasn't about destroying David. It was about claiming my truth and protecting my daughter. That's a different kind of justice. I learned that kindness is revolutionary. Every person who showed me grace or Rosa, Dr. Park, Gerald, Judge Porter, they changed my life, not with grand gestures, but with consistent, quiet decency. And I learned that love is more resilient than we think. It can stretch across years of silence. It can survive the death of who we thought we were. It can bloom again in the most unlikely soil. I'm writing this story because someone suggested it might help others. I don't know if that's true, but if you're reading this and you're struggling with identity, with betrayal, with estrangement, with any of the 1,000 ways life breaks our hearts, I want you to know something. It's never too late. At 62, I started my life over. At 65, I reconciled with my daughter. At 72, I have a family that loves me for exactly who I am. The journey was hard. Some days, I didn't think I'd survive it, but I did, and so will you. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with others. Allow space for growth of yours and theirs. Seek kindness, and when you can, offer it. The world has enough cruelty. And know that sometimes the courtroom falls silent not because of something dramatic, but because truth has a way of commanding attention. Even quiet truth, even inconvenient truth, especially truth that comes wrapped in vulnerability and courage. My name is Margaret Hayes. For the first 62 years of my life, I was someone else. But I've been Margaret for 10 years now, and I've never been more certain of who I am." The judge froze when he saw me because he recognized something he thought was lost. But I wasn't lost. I was just finally found. And that, more than any revenge or vindication, is the victory worth celebrating. A